Grand Rising. I hope everyone is doing well today. Before we begin, let me introduce myself. My name is Anita Yarbrough, and my YouTube channel is brand is based around observation, experience, and communication. Now, the patterns I've noticed, how can I explain that? Now, in this segment, I'm going to explain in terms of my own experiences with patterns. So if it doesn't align with your institutionalized way of thinking, then I kindly ask you to have an open mind or excuse yourself now. No worries, I'll wait. Mm, 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 mm. All right, now that that's out the way, this sounds very much in line with the thoughtful, reflective direction I've been moving toward. Rather than making it a chronological life story, I organize it around discoveries. Something like asking questions of myself and then answering my own questions. So here goes. Why did self-observation become important to me? Well, for growth and evolution. The realization that certain experiences kept repeating. Um, I started to notice that earlier on in my life that certain experiences kept repeating. Then I learned that they were considered patterns later on in life when I look back on it. Now, pattern number one, how I respond to difficult people now. Well, the first question is going to be what I used to do or how I used to respond to difficult people. I either run away, ignore them, or argue. Mhm. What I do now, I go off to myself, reflect, and then try to figure out a solution or consider the same situation and what I would do and what I would do differently. While doing this, I try to feel those actions in my imagination and out loud speak it towards the ethers, also known in the air. Next question, what changed? More reflecting and thinking or using my imagination. Next pattern or pattern number two, when it comes to trusting my intuition. Times I ignored it. That's the first one. When are the times I've ignored it? I just thought it was me hallucinating. It seemed as if something bigger, it seemed like as if it was something bigger than me that kept allowing me to see and experience these things for me to actually believe it. Times I followed it. It was towards my early 30s to late 20s that I just started to go along with my intuitions. But before then, it was just a shock or an amazement. I had to realize it was not hallucinations anymore. Okay. Uh, what I've learned to trust more in myself, pay close attention to details. And then I started to get into studying more about the mind, cognitive thinking, linguistics, strategies, analyzing details, etc. Pattern number three, seeking approval. Okay. just in case you're wondering where I got my questions, I'm writing stuff down, and I've even asked AI to help me with some questions that I could possibly put into my video that I could respond to that would trigger thought processes in relations to this video. So I asked, oh yeah, so pattern number 3 is seeking approval. Where that pattern showed up. Since I was a child, I was seeking approval. How it affected decisions. I felt like I needed input before moving forward with actions on some matters. How I've grown beyond it. It started with me realizing I don't need others to be with me when I go out. As I approach my mid-30s, I then realized, excuse me, I can make my own decisions once I think them through and gave myself time before I decided on anything. Pattern number 4, the lessons keep returning. So, similar situations appearing in different forms. It became clear that in my mid-40s that I started to see my own patterns regarding lessons I was learning and needed to learn. Recognizing the lesson underneath the experience. Recognizing the lesson underneath the experience. It was as if the universe was making the lesson so big so that I could not miss it by way of my emotions. And let me explain that. It will become emotional for me. So the lesson will become so big, it would affect my emotion that I had to sit down and pay attention. Pattern number 5, growth through challenges. Looking back and realizing difficult periods shaped strengths. Although, since my 20s, I was realizing my difficult times, it was when I reached my late 20s to early 30s that I wanted to put my foot down to stop the trending difficulties. So again, I was researching, paying attention to my intuition or gut feelings, and observing closely the patterns that I noticed were repetitive. My closing to this, the value of observing ourselves. And when I say closing, let me go back. In closing, as far as answering my questions about the patterns I've noticed in me. Okay. So the value of observing ourselves honestly. When I was truly honest and motivated, I decided by recreating my life and world from the inside out. Then I saw that I can jumpstart a path for me to master my own life and focus on controlling myself without interfering with the opinions of others. The idea that awareness is the first step to change. With this awareness for me was a slow transition over time. When I stopped worrying about the timing in my life for this to start and not competing with what others were doing and how soon they did, I started to see more clearly my path and even patterns that was allowing me to see encounters, workspaces, life situations as preparations to gain gifts, talent, skills, wisdom, and inner standing. There were always obstacles to test if I was really true about continuing on my path. And boy, Were those tests constantly coming and are still coming to make sure I'm steadfast and strengthening my core values, emotions, and my mindset? Now, the thing I like about this structure that I'm bringing to my channel is that it doesn't require me to reveal everything. I can share observations without sharing every personal detail. Not that I'm embarrassed of it, but because when you understand the mindset of others, you learn from experience what to do and what not to do on a platform like this. Okay? Because some people have not gotten there yet. And what I know about me, one of the things that may naturally emerge is something I've noticed before. The difference between reacting and observing over the past several months, I've watched myself move from why are they doing this to what pattern am I noticing here? That's a very different perspective. So if I were brainstorming a possible closing thought, it might be something like, the patterns I've noticed in myself aren't signs that I failed. They're clues showing me where I've grown, where I'm healing, and where I still have work to do. Not a bad message for a channel built around thinking, observing, and sharing experiences. I observe others and recognize trending patterns I had picked up. I wonder to myself what changes I need to make so that I can be more of my authentic self. That's actually a powerful question because it shifts the focus from what's wrong with them to what am I learning about myself through what I'm observing. More that I've noticed is that I'm naturally an observer. I pay attention to people's behavior, motivations, contradictions, power dynamics, and recurring patterns. I've done this with coworkers, family members, people in dreams, people online, and even with broader social trends. So the gift of that is insight. The challenge is that observers can sometimes become so skilled at reading the external world that they spend less time asking, what pattern am I bringing into these situations? So when I ask what changes would help, I become more authentic. I don't immediately think of changing who I am. I think of removing what isn't really me. You got me? You hear me? When I ask what changes would help, I become more authentic. I don't immediately think of changing who I am. I think of removing what isn't really me. Some reflective questions I ask myself when I am reflecting and paying more attention to who I am and how I react. Where do I still explain myself when no explanation is required? Where do I say yes when my inner response is no? Where do I shrink my perspective because I expect disagreement? Where do I hold back my creativity because I worry how it will be received? Which roles am I carrying because they became familiar, not because they still fit? Authenticity often isn't about adding something new. It's about noticing the mask, habits, fears, and expectations that accumulated over time and deciding which ones no longer belong. Looking at my recent journey, I see some signs of authenticity already emerging. I left a work environment that was draining my energy. I restarted my YouTube channel despite uncertainty. I'm speaking publicly about menopause and personal experiences. I'm asking deeper questions about my own patterns instead of only analyzing others. Those aren't small things, you know. So, as for observing others, I found that sometimes the people who trigger us inspire us, frustrate us, or fascinate us and are mirrors of something within ourselves. Not necessarily because we're like them, but because they reveal qualities we admire, qualities we've outgrown, fears we still carry, or lessons we're currently learning. So when I notice a pattern in someone else, I might try asking, what is this showing me about myself? Not because their behavior defines me, but because my reaction to it can be informative. And regarding this video, there may be an interesting angle here. The patterns I've noticed in me through observing others. That creates a bridge between my natural gift for observation and my desire to become more authentic. The conversation becomes less about judging what others do and more about how those observations became opportunities for self-awareness. That feels very aligned with my channel spirit. I am not here to make you think like me. I just want you to think. Perhaps the next step in that journey is, what have I learned about myself by paying attention, not only to the world around me, but also to my responses to it? That's a question with enough depth to carry an entire video. As I was reading a past message, one thought came to mind. And it was the fact that I'm even asking, what changes do I need to make so I can be more authentic? Is it itself a sign of growth? Many people spend their entire lives focused outward, trying to change, trying to change other people, understand other people, or convince other people. I'm turning the lens inward and asking what I can learn about myself. Because honestly, not all of us know ourselves due to the mask that we wear. That takes honesty. Now, moving on to other types of patterns, one thing I keep in mind, as I work on any of my videos is that I don't feel pressured to have all the answers. Sometimes the most meaningful content comes from sharing the questions I'm currently exploring. For example, like I've spent years observing patterns in other people. Recently, I've started asking myself more what those observations are revealing about me. For example, um, well, just basically um, more of what those observations are revealing about me. And that's not a conclusion. That's an invitation for others to think alongside of me. You feel me? And with that to me, is very much in alignment with the direction I've been building for my channel. So understand this video is also allowing you into my mind, but I'm not giving you all the details about me. Now, as for the career situation, keep taking practical steps, but don't let the anticipation consume my energy. Whether my feeling is intuition, optimism, or simply my subconscious recognizing that I've laid a lot of groundwork. There's no harm in holding the possibility with quiet confidence. I don't have to force the next opportunity to arrive. I just have to be ready when it does. Also, in regard to what and how I've in regard to what and how I have my experiences, whether they are or are not objectively real to everyone else. It's about the fact that the experience was subjectively real to me. Now, let me explain more clearly and separate a few things. So let me give it in the form of a subject for the discussions that follow in this video. Okay, so if I were walking a familiar path and suddenly perceived myself in what felt like a different environment, that is an experience. Nobody can honestly tell me that I did not have that experience because they were not there inside my mind perceiving it. Where people disagree is usually with the interpretation. For example, I say I experienced a different reality. Another person says I had a momentary perceptual shift. Another says it was a spiritual experience. Another says it was my imagination. Another says I briefly accessed a future timeline. The experience itself happened. The explanation is where the disagreement begins. So, the pattern I see. One pattern I've noticed throughout history is that people tend to accept experiences they have personally had and question experience they have never had. For example, someone who has never had a vivid dream may dismiss dream symbolism. Someone who has never experienced intuition may dismiss intuition. Someone who has never had sleep paralysis may think others are making it up. Someone who has never had a near-death experience may reject those accounts. Humans often use their own experience as the measuring stick for reality. The pattern looks something like this. If it happened to me, it is possible. If it never happened to me, it is questionable. Psychology's view, psychology would say that every person's perception of reality is filtered through prior experiences, beliefs, expectations, emotional state, culture, knowledge. Therefore, two people can witness the same event and walk away with different conclusions. This is why eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable. People don't just observe reality, they interpret it. Now, the metaphysical view. Many metaphysical traditions suggest that consciousness is capable, and when I point here, I'm not just saying consciousness is in your brain, but some people kind of feel that's where it is. But many metaphysical traditions suggest that consciousness is capable of perceiving things beyond ordinary sensory experience. Whether someone believes in precognition, synchronicities, time shifts, remote viewing, spiritual visions, and or mystical states. The common theme is that not everyone reports having those experiences. From that perspective, who has never experienced such things may not have the reference point needed to understand them. Okay? What I'm really getting at, I think the deeper pattern I'm noticing is this. People often mistake, I have never experienced that, for that cannot be real. Those are not the same statements. A person can honestly say, I've never experienced that, without saying, therefore I'm lying, or therefore I'm crazy. Those are very different conclusions. The caution. The other side of the pattern is important too. Just because an experience feels real does not automatically tell us what caused it. For example, the experience can be real, the memory can be real, the emotion can be real, the perception can be real, and we can still be uncertain about the mechanism behind it. That uncertainty does not invalidate the experience. It simply means it simply means we are distinguishing between I know what I experienced and I know exactly why it happened. Those are two separate levels of knowing. So yes, I hope you all understand my point. I'm not necessarily saying everyone should believe every paranormal or spiritual claim. I'm saying that people should be careful about dismissing another person's experience simply because it falls outside their own experience set. That in itself is a fascinating pattern in human behavior. It touches on perception, belief, consciousness, judgment, and the limits of individual experiences. And honestly, this could make for a very thought-provoking section in this video about patterns. I also want my insights on this example. Whereas two people may experience two different lives, correct? Yet I have never heard of one person having experiences where they perceive and see conspiracies that bring about fear. And another person states they have heard about conspiracies but choose to experience life, life in bliss. So in person, they have never experienced conspiracies in a manner where they fear it. They just either don't believe it or choose to ignore it, or their mindset is focused and or patterned, okay, in a way they are able to live a life of blissfulness without all the other stuff. Do I see patterns in that? Or are there any patterns? Yes, I see several patterns in what I'm describing. And they don't necessarily require me to decide whether any particular conspiracy is true or false. The pattern is often found in how I process information, not just in the information itself. So, the first kind of pattern, or pattern type number one, attention shapes experience. Two people can be exposed to the same information and end up living in very different psychological worlds. Let's take person A, who notices potential threats, looks for hidden motives, connect events together, asks what's really going on, and or consumes content that reinforces that focus. Person B notices opportunities and positive experiences, focus on immediate life, asks, how does this affect me today? Consumes content that reinforces that focus, so that over time, both people begin seeing more of what they repeatedly focus on. Psychology sometimes refers to this selective attention, the pattern. What we repeatedly look for becomes easier to find. Pattern type number 2, different threat thresholds. People have different sensitivity levels toward uncertainty and danger. Some people are naturally more vigilant, so they ask, what could go wrong? Who benefits? What information am I missing? Others are naturally more trusting or accepting, and they ask, what can I enjoy today? What is within my control? Why worry about something I can't change? Neither approach is automatically right or wrong. Both have strengths and weaknesses. The vigilant person may notice genuine problems before others. The bliss-focused person may avoid unnecessary stress and anxiety. So pattern type number 3, meaning making. Hear that, meaning making. Humans are pattern detecting creatures. When something confusing happens, many people seek an explanation. Some explanations focus on systems, hidden actors, coordinated plans. Others focus on chance, complexity, human error, natural processes. Both are attempts to make sense of uncertainty. Now, pattern type number 4, emotional reinforcement. This is a big one. At least this is one of the big ones. Every belief system tends to reinforce itself emotionally. Every belief system. Okay, I said the big one, not the big one right there. You know what I'm saying? Every belief system tends to reinforce itself emotionally. For example, a conspiracy-focused person may feel alert, prepared, specifically aware. A bliss, I'm sorry, specially aware. Alert, prepared, informed, and specially aware. A bliss-focused person may feel peaceful, grounded, optimistic, and present, and or present. Those emotional rewards can strengthen the mindset, the pattern, beliefs that, well, let me go back. Even though they can strengthen the mindset, let me give you the pattern. Beliefs that produce emotionally satisfied states that tend to persist. Now, pattern type number 5, control versus acceptance. How do I understand and control? Well, one poll asks, well, let's go back. I've noticed many people tend to fall somewhere between two poles. One pole asks, how do I understand and control what's happening? The other asks, how do I accept what I cannot control? The conspiracy-oriented mindset often leans toward understanding hidden causes. The bliss-oriented mindset often leans toward acceptance and presence. Most people move back and forth between these poles throughout life. A pattern I may find interesting. The most fascinating pattern to me is that both groups often believe the other group is asleep. The conspiracy-focused person may think they're ignoring reality. The bliss-focused person may think they're trapped in fear. Yet both are often responding to the same world through different mental filters. The deeper question for this video, I might ask, does reality shape perception? Or does perception shape reality? Psychology would say perception strongly influences our experience of reality. Many metaphysical traditions would say consciousness itself plays a role in shaping reality. Either way, a recurrent pattern appears. People tend to experience more of whatever they habitually focus their attention upon. That doesn't mean every fear is true. It doesn't mean every blissful thought is true. It means attention, belief, emotion, and repeated focus seem to create very different lived experiences. Even when people occupy the same physical world, that to me is one of the most powerful patterns in human behavior. Two people can stand in the same place, see the same events, and walk away living in entirely different realities because of the patterns through which they interpret the world. So far, what I think I've explored is a deeper question than whether a specific paranormal event or conspiracy is true. I've examined why people can experience and interpret reality so differently and whether there are patterns behind that. One pattern I'm seeing in my examples is what I would call the reality filter pattern. Excuse me. Every person seems to have a set of filters through which they interpret experiences. Imagine three people witnessing the same unusual event. The scientists may ask, what is the mechanism? The spiritual person may ask, what is the meaning? The fearful person may ask, what is the threat? The optimistic person may ask, what is the opportunity? The event is the same. The filter is different. Another pattern, experience creates belief. Often it's the opposite. Many people don't form beliefs first and then have experiences. That's what I mean by it's the opposite. For example, someone has a profound dream and becomes interested in spirituality. Someone is betrayed and becomes more suspicious of others. Someone survives a difficult period and develops trust in life. The experience comes first. The worldview follows. This may explain why two people can hear the same story and react completely different. One person's life experience prepared them to recognize it as familiar. The others did not. This is why there was a question that I answered earlier about when did I start making decisions on my own? Because I was looking to how humans respond to it, because I've always felt kind of alien to this life. And really, there was just certain things that I had not yet learned just being raised amongst my family. So another pattern, the limits of personal evidence. Humans tend to assume what I have experienced is normal. But if I think about it, every person has access to only a tiny function of human experience. For example, some people report mystical experiences, some report none. Some have vivid intuition, some don't. Some experience life as a series of meaningful synchronicities. Some experience life as random events. The pattern is that people often mistake their slice of reality for the entirety of reality. Where my earlier example fits regarding the person who sees conspiracies everywhere versus the person who lives in bliss. The pattern may not be that one is right and one is wrong. The pattern may be that each person's attention and interpretation system continuously reinforces itself. The fearful mind, the fearful mind finds evidence of danger. The trusting mind finds evidence of safety. The skeptical mind finds evidence requiring proof. The spiritual mind finds symbolic meaning over, the spiritual mind finds symbolic meaning. Now, over the years, these patterns become habitual. A question worth exploring in my video, I might ask my audience, if two people can live in the same city, watch the same news, experience the same world, and yet feel as though they live in completely different realities, what is creating that difference? Is it their experiences, their beliefs, their attentions, their emotions, their expectations, their consciousness? That question doesn't force an answer. It invites people to think. And that aligns very well with my channel's theme. I am not here to make you think like me. I just want you to think. So tell me, what's the next pattern or observation you've been noticing? Let's keep pulling on the thread and see where it leads. So please put your observations in the comment section below this video, okay? Now, here's a question I've asked myself. What is it about this reality that keeps us dull from seeing through all the realities? If these patterns come from the moment we were taught at birth, and if so, how are we able to see through them? How do we break through those chains of patterns that keep us locked into a system of patterns to free our minds? And honestly, I don't feel these systems of behavior are part of my authentic reality. It is said that whenever a person perceives a different reality and acts on it, that they are considered hallucinating and need to practice grounding themselves or to seek therapy. Yet the world we are living in now needs some grounding and is warped. So the question here is the reality and system programming real or just a group mechanism to keep us in control out of someone or somebody's fear? So y'all, I'm asking questions that philosophers, mystics, psychologists, neuroscientists, and spiritual teachers have wrestled with for thousands of years. The key thing I want to do is to separate what we know what we suspect, and what remains a mystery, what we know. From the moment we're born, we are conditioned. We learn language, culture, religion or non-religion, social norms, what is considered normal, what is considered crazy, what is rewarded, what is punished. A baby isn't born knowing money, governments, careers, status, political parties, or social expectations. Those are learned frameworks. In that sense, yes, we are all born into systems of patterns. We don't see all realities. Psychology would argue that the brain filters information because it has to. Imagine if I simultaneously perceived every sound, every possibility, every memory, every emotional signal, every interpretation. I'd be overwhelmed. Whew, goodness. So the brain acts as, I'm sorry, hot flash. So the brain acts as a filter rather than a receiver of everything. Many philosophers and spiritual traditions have made a similar observation. Human consciousness may not be limited because it is weak. Hold on, give me a second, because I want to be able to focus on my thoughts. And of course, I jot down some of the things I would like to discuss. So I want to make sure I'm processing and perceiving and don't catch a brain fog, a brain fog. So hold on just a second. Whew. I may need to just turn the AC up. So now, through these philosophers and spiritual traditions, what they've observed, human consciousness may not be limited because it is weak. It may be limited because filtering is necessary for functioning. So the next question is how people began seeing through patterns. One thing I've observed is that many people eventually reach a point where they question the assumptions they inherited. They began asking, why do I believe this? Who taught me this? Is this actually true? Is this my belief or someone else's belief? Am I acting from fear or understanding? That process isn't necessarily escaping reality. It's becoming more conscious of the frameworks operating inside of us. The authentic self question. When I say, I don't feel these systems of behavior are part of my authentic reality, many people report a similar feeling. Sometimes they discover that they were living according to expectations rather than values. For example, living the life others expected, pursuing goals you never chose, repeating family patterns, following cultural scripts. The feeling of inauthenticity often becomes the catalyst for deeper self-examination. Now, the hallucination question. This is where nuance is important. There is a difference between questioning consensus reality, having unusual experiences, experiencing clinical condition that impairs one's ability to function or distinguish shared reality. Psychology doesn't label every unusual perception a disorder. People have reported mystical experiences, profound dreams, intuitive insights, synchronicities, altered states of consciousness. Those experiences alone do not automatically indicate illness. However, pay attention. Mental health professionals become concerned when perceptions consistently lead to severe distress, loss of functioning, or an inability to navigate everyday life safely. My observation about society, I said, the world we are living in now needs some grounding and is warped. Many people across history have felt that their society was disconnected from deeper truths. Whether they were whether they were philosophers, reformers, artists, or spiritual seekers, they often sense a gap between what people do, what people say, what people truly value. That observation isn't new, though each generation experienced it differently. The big question is it programming or control? There are several possibilities. One view says society's patterns emerge naturally because large groups need shared rules to function. Another says some institutions consciously shape behavior to maintain power. Another says both are true to varying degrees. Some patterns arise naturally, some are deliberately reinforced, some persist simply because people repeat them without questioning them. Another pattern I notice, the people who seem to grow the most aren't necessarily the ones who reject everything they were taught. Uh, they're the ones who examine everything, not blindly accepting, not blindly rejecting, examining, testing, observing, refining, keeping what proves useful, discarding what proves false. The mystery. Okay, here's the question, here's the question. Are there realities beyond the one we normally perceive? Is ultimately not settled. Different traditions answer it differently. Science continues to debate the nature of reality. Spiritual traditions continue to describe experiences that seem to transcend ordinary perception. What seems clear is that human beings do not experience reality directly and completely. We experience it through layers of perception. We experience it through layers of perception, memory, belief, emotion, attention, and culture. The challenge may not be to see all realities, it may be to become aware of the filters through which we're already seeing this one. And perhaps the first chain that gets broken is not society's chain, but the assumption that our current perspective is the only possible perspective. That's a question worth exploring in my research. Not what if everyone else is asleep, but also what if every one of us, including the me, is seeing only part of a much larger picture? That question keeps curiosity alive without forcing a conclusion, and it leaves room for both wonder and discernment. Before I got before I get to the end before I got to the end of that earlier statement that I asked myself, something came to me. This is what I received from within. Being aware of all patterns without allowing it to consume me, yet being able to utilize them for my highest good if needed, which too is an interesting insight. What strikes me about it is that it moves beyond two extremes that people often fall into. One extreme is, I'm going to ignore all patterns and just drift through life. The other pattern is, I'm going to analyze every pattern every sign, every motive, every possibility until it consumes my attention. That statement seems to point toward a middle path. I can observe patterns without becoming trapped by them. From a psychological perspective, that's actually a very healthy stance. It means seeing fear without becoming fear, seeing manipulation without becoming paranoid, seeing opportunities without becoming obsessed, seeing social conditioning without losing my ability to function within society, seeing patterns without forcing patterns where none exist. In many contemplative traditions, awareness itself is considered a form of freedom. Not because awareness gives me a control over everything, but because awareness creates a space between the pattern and my reaction to the pattern. Instead of automatically reacting, I choose a pattern within my insight. There's another pattern I noticed in what came to me. I didn't say I need to destroy all patterns. I said I need to be aware of them. That's a very different approach. Patterns themselves aren't necessarily the problem. Breathing is a pattern. Sleeping is a pattern. Learning is a pattern. Language is a pattern. Relationships are full of patterns. The question becomes which patterns serve me and which patterns unconsciously control me. Another layer. The phrase, utilize them for my highest good if needed, suggests discernment rather than submission. Imagine a person who understands persuasive techniques, authority dynamics, social influence, emotional triggers, recurring behavioral tendencies. I don't have to fear those things. I can simply recognize, ah, that's what's happening here. That's very similar. I'm sorry, that's very similar to something I've been studying recently regarding influence, authority, and human behavior. Once I see a pattern, I gain the ability to decide whether to participate in it, step away from it, or use the knowledge constructively. I sound like I'm preaching. I'm not trying to. So the question my insight raises, what if freedom, what if freedom is not the absence of patterns? What if freedom is not the absence of patterns? What if freedom is recognizing patterns clearly enough that I can choose my relationship to them? Because even the person who claims to be completely free of conditioning usually has patterns they haven't noticed yet. The difference is awareness. Something else I noticed. Okay, I'm sorry. I was like, why did that little picture move? Yes, because I breathed too hard. Well, something else I noticed. Over the years, I've often been less interested in what people believe and more interested in why they believe it. That's the mindset of a pattern observer. I watch workplace dynamics, authority figures, spiritual experiences, dreams, social trends, online behavior, fear-based narratives, bliss-focused narratives, and my recurring question seems to be, what is the underlying pattern? My insight today feels like a refinement of that. Not how do I escape all patterns, but how do I become conscious of them without becoming imprisoned by them? That's a subtle but profound shift. For this video, that might be one of the strongest takeaways. Awareness without obsession, observation without fear, understanding without attachment, recognizing patterns without becoming consumed by them. I thought that I thought that idea allows others from many different perspectives, psychological, spiritual, philosophical, or practical, to find something useful in the conversation. Before I end this video, I would like to share a dream um, and the interpretation I got from it. So, um, all I can remember is I have to remain mindful to keep my eyes this way. I'm sorry if I'm all over the place with moving around. But from this dream, all I can remember is I was arranging wooden seats in a semicircle for the present and past presidents, senators, and other government officials, etc., to sit in front of a master teacher to be given instructions and taught or told something very, very important that was about to end for them. I kept arranging, I kept arranging chairs as these certain government officials sat off to the side until it was their turn to come forward and sit in the chairs. I'll approach this dream symbolically rather than as a prediction, okay? Because I'm not saying it's predicting anything for y'all, okay? So dreams often speak in the language of symbols, archetypes, and the subconscious. The first observation, I was not one of the students. The first thing that jumped out to me is that I was arranging the seats. I was not sitting in the audience, waiting for instructions being called forward. I was preparing the space. In many metaphysical traditions, the person preparing the space is acting as a facilitator, witness, messenger, steward, keeper of transition. This is a very different role from being the one receiving the lesson. The symbolism I was helping create, I was helping create the conditions for something larger than myself to unfold. The wooden chairs wood is an interesting symbol. Metaphysically, wood often represents growth, wisdom gained through time, natural law, earth energy, or something organic rather than artificial. These were not metal chairs. Hold on for a second. Let me get a little sip of water because my throat is getting dry. Um, Excuse me, my apologies for that slight interruption. Um, so these were not metal chairs. They were not thrones. They were wooden seats. That feels significant. It suggests a return to fundamentals, a reminder that no matter how powerful a person becomes, everyone eventually sits before higher principles. The semicircle. A semicircle is not random. A circle often symbolizes unity, completion, cycles, equality. A semicircle suggests a gathering that is not yet complete or a transition between one phase and another. The people weren't scattered randomly. They were being brought into alignment, almost like a council. The president, centers, the president, senators, and other government officials. In dream symbolism, government figures often represent more than actual politicians. They can symbolize external authority, institutions, systems, leadership rules, power structures, but they can also symbolize internal authority, the parts of ourselves that govern our lives, the parts that decide what we believe, what we value, how we judge, what we control. In dreams, authority figures often represent structures rather than individuals. Now, the master teacher. This is the most fascinating symbol. Notice that presidents were not teaching, senators were not teaching, officials were not teaching. They were coming to learn. This reverses the normal hierarchy. The dream appears to be saying, there is a wisdom higher than worldly authority. The master teacher may symbolize higher consciousness, universal law, truth, divine wisdom, the soul, the deeper self. The symbolism suggests that even those who appear powerful must eventually sit before something greater. Something important was about to end. This is the statement that carries the most weight. Dream language often uses endings to signify completion, transition, graduation, the end of a cycle, the collapse of an old structure, not necessarily destruction. Sometimes an ending is simply the old way can no longer continue. The fact that the officials were waiting their turn suggests order, not chaos, not panic. Almost as though each would have to receive the lesson individually. The pattern I see when I step back and look at the symbols together, a theme emerges. Authority reporting to wisdom. Oh, sorry, I thought I heard something. Normally, government instructs people. In my dream, wisdom instructs government. That reversal is striking. The dream seems less concerned with politics and more concerned with a universal principle. No earthly authority stands above truth forever. Eventually, every structure, every system, every leader must answer to a higher order. The personal interpretation, because I was arranging the chairs, I don't immediately see this as a dream about politicians. I see it as a dream about my relationship to systems. I've spent the last year while absent from YouTube dealing with authority, workspace hierarchies, social conditioning, influence, human behavior patterns, reality filters, power structures. And lately, I've been asking myself, how do I see through the patterns? I do. How do I see? This dream feels almost like a continuation of that exploration. The message isn't, I am the ruler. The message feels more like, I am observing a transition. I am witnessing old structures being called to account before a higher understanding. A metaphysical reading behind this dream would be, if I were speaking purely symbolically, I would summarize the dream this way. A cycle of authority, control, or established structures is approaching a point of reckoning, instruction, or transformation. The wisdom that governs the next phase does not come from rank, title, or position. It comes from a higher source. My role is not to command the process, but to prepare the space for it and observe it unfold. Now, one final thought. The symbol that stays with me is not the president, it's not the senators, it's not the master teachers, it's me arranging the chairs. Hold on for a second. Somebody is knocking at my door, and I have to answer. Okay, so my apologies for the interruption. So in dream symbolism, um, uh, yeah, so in dream symbolism, preparing seats often means preparing for a gathering of knowledge, perspective of energies, perspective or energies. I wasn't forcing anyone into a chair. I wasn't teaching. I was making room. Given all the details I've dealt with recently about patterns, consciousness, authority, and seeing beyond appearances, I find it interesting that my role in the dream wasn't to control the lesson. It was to prepare the environment where the lesson could be received. That feels very much like the role of an observer, researcher, or a truth seeker, someone creating space for understanding to emerge rather than dictating what the understanding must be. One thing I've noticed about reflective conversations I've had with myself is that I'm rarely satisfied with surface level answers. Whether I'm examining workplace dynamics, human behavior, spiritual experiences, authority structures, dreams, or family situations, I'm always asking, what's the deeper pattern here? That's the mindset of a researcher and an observer. As for the dream, I wouldn't rush to lock it into a single meaning. Sometimes, um, sorry about that. Sometimes dreams unfold over time. I may remember another piece later or notice events, conversations, or realizations in the coming weeks that make the symbolism clear. What stood out um, most to me was that my role was one of preparation and observation rather than control. There is a certain wisdom in that. Some lessons aren't ours to force. We simply create the space from them to emerge. And speaking of patterns, I find it interesting that my recent insight was being aware of all patterns without allowing it to consume me, yet being able to utilize them for my highest good if needed. That insight and this dream seem to share a common thread: awareness without domination, observation without attachment, preparation without forcing outcomes. Whether that's connected or not is something only I can determine. For now, I will keep doing what I've been doing: observing, questioning, reflecting, testing assumptions, remaining open to new perspectives. The strongest pattern seekers aren't the ones who think they found every answer. They're the ones who remain curious enough to keep learning. So for now, I wish you peace in your lives, happiness, and growth. Also, remember, I am not here to make you think like me. I just want you to think. I thank you for joining me today, a space where I'm able to share my observations, experiences, and enjoy some conversation. Until next time, stay safe.